Ooh, right. Let's get rid of that. Ooh, good feedback. Let's turn you off. Let's turn you on. More feedback. Right. Okay, so we're working. Get rid of that. Okay. Stuff open everywhere. Thanks like a DJ. some new music. Okay, where are we? Ooh. How's that? Too loud? The music's too loud this time. Hope you're there. Hope you're ready. Oh, hello. Morning. Okay, here we go, and welcome to, I'll get rid of one of them for you. Oh, you're not seeing it? How's that? Dang. Today all days, my camera decides to pack up. Welcome to Chaos Town. No, nothing there, right? a camera. Weird. And that's that one. Okay. Well, as always, we start the day with technical difficulties. It's something I have noticed in the last week or so as it's something I've noticed in the last week or so as more people have jumped online and are working from home. I don't quite understand. Well, I guess I do. I mean, everyone's always been working online anyway. But I guess with more people staying at home, streaming videos and the like, so putting a load on things, all sorts of things are freaking out. For example, it's a real pain in the butt, but my cameras are doing some weird. I've been streaming all week, and today they're not coming through. They're not coming through in that shot. Well, that's pre-record. No. Let's try that one. So I'm there. As always, the first thing you learn when you want to start streaming online is that it's like herding cats when it comes to technology. Audio is a little muddy, your voice is fighting through the music. Alright, good. I don't mind getting rid of the music because the music gives me the irrits. Is that better? One of the other things, the reason the music gives me the irrits is because it's all downloaded, it's all free from the YouTube audio library, which is an awesome resource. My hair, which is an awesome resource, but it is also limited selection of anything that's halfway decent that you're willing to listen to in the background. And I've been listening to that for weeks. Woke up this morning and I had one of those tracks in my head because I knew I was going to be doing this now. This week I will be mostly talking about... Alright, now let me start if you've not been here before. Okay, so this is my fortnightly vlogcast thingy. Where I come online and I part download the stuff. I'm a PhD writing thesis student, so it's partly for me to come here and download what I've been writing and thinking about during the week. It's partly to connect with people who are interested in live theatre making, or theatre making generally, but theatre making specifically using the medium of Web 2 technology, and how we can, particularly in a time at the moment, create work from home to be both creative and financially productive. There's a few different ways to, well, there's a, if you've just started looking into online because you're cooped up at home, your head might be swimming already, because there is just oodles and oodles and oodles of different stuff out there that it can be useful, and yes, like, but inevitably, like I'm having this morning, you end up kind of herding cats. There's so many moving parts, different technologies, different softwares, different platforms, different streaming services, different and the combination of them is almost infinite. So, yeah, it says you can see me. Maybe it's just at my end. Let's try this. Okay, now you can see me because I had a lovely little tutorial presentation set up today. I was going to talk you through some stuff, but it relied on me doing some camera magic. And the magic seems to be the camera's disappeared. So if you can hear me, then that's fine, I guess. We'll just go with that. One of the first things you'll learn, well, it's one of the first things people teach you or say when streaming is that audio, in terms of priority for tech, audio is probably your primary source. Like it's the most important thing. That viewers will stay with you, ideally, hopefully, viewers will stay with you as long as they can hear you clearly. If the videos, viewers tend to be a little bit more tolerant and patient of that. Hang on, let me put this one back. At least you've got some camera. And you can see me. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yes, that viewers will more than likely stay with your stream if they've got good audio and they can hear you. If they have good vision but no audio, it tends to be the other way around. What am I talking about this week? Okay, so this week I will be mostly talking about, if you've got any, okay, the other thing you need to know before I go on, okay, this is also the nature of this blog is a bit of a stream of consciousness. You're effectively just watching a mad scientist stuck in his little studio under his stairs, speaking the thoughts that come to him. If you've got any questions, ask. Now, if you're going to ask, let's try and see if we can wrangle some more horses here, because what I'm doing is I'm streaming to about 3 different locations at the moment. I'm streaming to Twitch, I'm streaming to YouTube, and I'm streaming to Twitter via Periscope. I'm doing multiple places. Now, theoretically, everyone can talk to me on all those different platforms using the chat rooms in each. But I can't, I'm dancing like a DJ here on the keyboard today and dealing with the tech problems as I go. So I can't keep across all of those. So if you want to chat to me, the 2 best ways to do it is to go to my YouTube channel and find Michael Allen Productions, Call of the Void, episode 12. It's there. And you will find this little chat thread. Let's go over there. You'll find this little chat thread where you can see me talking to Claire, who is actually Rob, which is another feature of being an online person, the nature of avatars. But that's for a different episode. I will come back to the nature of avatars and how we can do presentations. So I am an anthropologist, theatre making anthropologist. So actor, director, writer, producer, all of those things, but I'm an anthropologist and I study performance studies and cultural studies, media, and so on and so forth. My research has been in how the last few years has been in how theatre making can make the transition to online space, or how it's doing it, how it has been doing it, and how it could be doing it in the future. So out of that, I've learnt lots of things and developed lots of techniques and methodologies and ways to think about it, which up until maybe a week ago, was a quiet little thing of mine. In the last week or so, it's kind of exploded exponentially. Crazy. So this week, I'm getting back to it. This week, I will be talking about the concept of the fourth wall. Where am I getting this concept from? So I'm going to see if I can talk you through how performing online is one of the biggest, probably the biggest fundamental shift for a theatre maker is the concept of the fourth wall. It's something that we take for granted in all theatre, and film has it and TV has it. In film and TV it would be called crossing the line, or the 180 rule. It's kind of it's a concept. It's not actually a wall. We all know that. We all kind of so what's interesting from an anthropological point of view is that it's a social agreement that we all just slip into the behaviour of. It's a concept that determines power and authority, who's allowed to speak and who's not allowed to speak. So actors are allowed to speak, audiences are not. Audiences are not allowed to speak if they're in the theatre. Audiences can't speak if they're watching the television or a film. So it creates a distance between, an abstract distance at least, between an audience and performer. It can be broken, it can be adapted, it can be changed, we know that. That concept has been spoken about in anthropology in the past, and the argument was that you can only break the fourth wall because the concept of the wall is there in the first place. You can't have one without the other. You can't break something if it doesn't exist in the first place, which is kind of the catch-22 about it. The other thing is, so there were actually quite heated debates, academic debates, between an anthropologist called Victor Turner and theatre makers called Artaud and Grotowski and Brecht. Those of you who are the theatre making side of it would know that they were people who tried to disassemble or democratise the performing space in order to create a transcendent moment for the audience, such that it was a very spiritual transformation. The problem really is that those relationships of power and authority still exist. So it's the performers and the directors and the writers who determine what the experience is the audience goes through. They're the ones in charge. They're the ones that tell the audience ultimately. And the other thing about that is that it gave the audience some sort of autonomy and agency themselves, that they could actually say, no, I don't want to participate in that. I do not want to run around and naked in this cold hall and paint myself red and do all that amazing stuff in order to have a transcendent experience. I actually want to sit here and watch. So even though in real life, human beings sharing the same space and time, we can try and break that wall, I would argue that it's very difficult to do so. Possibly stand-up comedians can do it. Obviously, I'm not talking about things like music or those sorts of things. I'm talking about narrative drama. Those sorts of performances are slightly different, and that's where stand-up comedy kind of crosses the line a little bit. Dame Edna, for example. It's a performance, it's a show, it's a stand-up comedy. She's talking to the audience. That's probably one of the few occasions. That style, anyway. So, what does all of that mean for performing online for a theatre maker? So, there is already a lot of online theatre being streamed at the moment, and even more in the last few days. So many companies are just pumping out material. in terms of the experience of watching it though, the fourth wall's still there. Alright, so let me take you to my first image, which I really hope comes up for you. Get rid of that. No, it doesn't. Well, it's not for me anyway. I don't know why. Frustrating as buggery. Anyway, so this is a kind of representation of the theatre as we would know it. There's your proscenium arch stage. The actor is performing on the stage. I'm not sure whether this is coming up for you or not, but there's actually meant to be on the right hand side of your screen the video capture of me speaking, as if I am watching that actor on the stage. Now, that actor on stage behind that fourth wall is what Stanislavski called in a place of public solitude, in that his character is in its own realm and world, and it's doing its own thing, and it's having its own experience in a solitary moment, but it's a public solitude because we're all watching it. Yeah. Now, if I move on and say, so what a lot of theatre companies are doing at the moment by streaming their performances and their plays, yeah, what they're doing is they're effectively putting a monitor. The monitor and the screen is almost a physical representation of that wall. Yep. It also means that in this example, they're using the web almost as a conduit, as a channel or a hose or a pipe to deliver content and to deliver product. It's a delivery service. Not seeing me on the right hand side of the frame, thank you for that. Yeah, my cameras have gone schizo because they're turning up in some shots and they're not turning up in others, and I can't figure out why. What a day. Brilliant. Yeah, so they're using the internet as a conduit, as a delivery service for what they're doing. So essentially the performance is still there. It's been performed in another time and place. Sometimes those performances are a camera at the back of the auditorium. Sometimes they're much more complex with multiple cameras and broadcast editing and stuff like that. So the monitor represents that. And so we end up with this situation where the monitor is effectively replacing that proscenium arch stage. Yeah. So the relationship between the audience and the actors hasn't changed. Look, there we go. I'm back to this camera anyway. I've lost my FaceTime camera in my computer, but I'm back to this camera anyway, so we have something. That's nice. Let's give us a bit of background. Oh no, don't like that. Ooh, let's go. Sorry, give me 2 secs. Just doing a bit of problem solving. Okay, that's a bit better. So we end up in this situation, which is probably indicative of how it looks. We end up in our home and we're watching the performance. Hasn't changed. The relationship with it is still the same. We're watching it as an observer and a voyeur. That actor is in a sense of public solitude. What's different about online though is as people are writing and texting and actually doing, is that being online and being internet connected and being in a Web 2 universe, it's actually an active process on behalf of anyone who engages in it. From the moment you log on, from the moment you create an identity, from the moment that you chat to someone in a chat room, you are engaged, and that is fundamentally kind of the point of Web 2 connectivity, is that people can talk to one another, they can input and be engaged and communicate and do those things. Now, if you are watching an online streamed performance and you don't have the ability to engage in that back and forth communication, that dialogue, then you're kind of reverted back into that relationship of just watching a film. Yeah? So if you want to film your theatre, for example, if you want to film your performance and you want to put it up on YouTube, you're effectively making a short film, right? Now, what I was interested in was trying to explore a way of performing online that could retain that visceral experience and relationship with an audience that you get when you're in a theatre, that feeling of the oohs and the ahs and the dialogue between the audience. You can feel all that energy. That when we think of theatre, we think of that kind of energy in the room, a shared energy. When we sit and watch a play online, we can see that that energy may exist in the room where the play is being performed and filmed, but we're not necessarily a part of that. Well, we're not a part of that. We're not a part of that spatially in a physical distance, and we're also not a part of that temporally in terms of time, because it would have been filmed ages ago and we're watching it later. All right? There's a whole other conversation about that. So what happens then? See, that's a pity. All right. What happens then is, okay, let me, because I'm meant to have a different camera in here, but I can't. So I've got to try and fix it. Give me a second. Sorry, bear with me. What happens then is you get this situation in an online space where the person, where both people can communicate at the same time. I can talk to Rob, Rob can talk to me. Rob expects, well, people online expect to be able to talk to me. That's the point of coming here and talking to me. I should be expected to talk back to you. That's the point too. Yeah. Now that becomes problematic when you want to write a play. And this idea of the fourth wall is deeply embedded in so many of the ways that we even consider stuff. Because when you write a play, you're writing a narrative, you're writing a story. Yeah? It's a piece of literature. And because you're writing it down, it's fixed. And you can only observe the story unfold as you read the words and unpack them. So as soon as this is something we discovered in research, as soon as you start to write a text, write a script, write a piece of dialogue between two different actors, immediately the person on the screen over there is outside and on the other side of that fourth wall in terms of their relationship and their ability to talk. They've been locked out. They can't talk to the characters. The characters can't talk to them. This public solitude experience exists again. And even if you're doing that live, and if I was to be talking to someone here, like, I'm talking to you and you're talking to me and we're doing, all right, I've straight away gone into that 180 rule that you're on that side and you're effectively on the other side of the fourth wall. And so this relationship doesn't exist. Now, on many occasions when we were streaming and we were doing stuff, we would do something and we would often get comments from people, why aren't you talking to us? That's why we come here. We come here to talk and communicate. So I quickly realised that you can't just tell a narrative story between two characters and then leave the audience out. So how do you get the audience in? Right there. The other thing, okay, yeah, I'm getting sidetracked. I do. The other thing is that for every in this version here, right, the audience is an aggregate mass. Get this other camera back up for you. All right, we sit there as an aggregate mass. We are all individuals, sure, but we sit there as an aggregate mass, a lump of body. Right. That button. Okay. Yep, we're an audience mass. When you come to this version here, right, that quickly gets separated because every one of you who are out there watching are watching individually. Individually, you can comment. I don't, as an actor, from the perspective as an actor, I don't hear the collective groan or sigh or ooh or ah. I hear individual, independent comments come from individual people. So instead of dealing with a mass of people one-to-one like that, all of a sudden we're in a relationship where we're dealing with this. We're dealing with lots of people simultaneously. Each one of them can tweet, talk back in a chat and all the rest of it. And that gets quite dynamic. So the challenge is, how do you write a piece of narrative drama between two characters that have character arcs and journeys, beginnings, middles and ends, and all of those literature points? How do you write that character arc that includes the ability for an audience to communicate with you independently and gives them the authority and the right and the opportunity to do that and still maintain your narrative? Because the thing is, because we tried this too, it's a little bit like improvisation theatre. The thing is, what we would do is we would be doing an exercise, and then we would ask the audience, give us a suggestion for a city that we're performing in, or that sort of stuff. Crickets, nothing happened. That's the other thing about this, is that everyone there has free will. You can choose to write or choose not to write. You demand the opportunity to write or to talk or communicate, but you also retain the free will and the option to not. So that adds another layer to writing narrative. How do you have narrative drama that includes an active audience who may or may not communicate back with you? Poses some problems. Now, there is a way to do that. Thankfully, I've figured it out. There is a way to do that. But it means conceptually we have to think of things differently. When we create theatre in a space, the space determines how you tell the story. How big is your stage? How big is the auditorium? Where are the exits? Where are the entrances? What sort of lighting do I have? All of these elements, these structural elements around you, help narrow and define how you tell the story, how you tell the narrative. Yeah. Keith Johnson surgery. Yes, they are like an interrupting audience. Absolutely. And they're an unreliable interrupting audience. When you want them to interrupt you, they don't. When you don't want them to interrupt you, they do. And the actor has to be prepared to work with that, because you don't want to alienate your audience. So you've got to work with them, but you've still got to maintain your narrative. So yes, you're in a theatre, you're working with space, you've got physical space and life all these things that help shape and define how you put the performance together. Right. Now, we have to take the same approach and apply it to online theatre. So, when or an on-life universe, right? So in an online universe, there are multiple ways to communicate. There is Twitter, there is Instagram, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Pinterest, YouTube. It goes on. Like I said at the top of the show, it's exponentially nuts how many different combinations there are out there. And on each of those individual platforms is an opportunity to tell a story. So there's a guy in America called John Gable, I think. I can't remember off the top. I think it's John Gable. And now he was he is a playwright. And what he was doing is he was creating characters, and then he was giving them Twitter handles or Twitter identities. And those characters would talk to each other, and the narrative would unfold over days. And the audience essentially followed those characters. It's a little unclear from what I've read about him whether the audience could talk to those characters, and if they could, would those characters talk back, or were they sort of hermetically sealed and they weren't aware of the universe around them in that fourth wall concept. But it wasn't clear. There's certainly a lot of research out there. There's heaps of research out there at the moment about how humans are using these platforms to present identities and avatars of themselves, and that is a kind of storytelling platform. As far as an actor or a theatre maker is concerned, that's an opportunity for storytelling platform. The thing is, each platform operates differently, blessing and a curse, because each platform has a different audience. Each platform looks at different things. A Twitter audience is different from your Instagram audience, is different from your LinkedIn audience. So there's different audiences, and those audiences communicate in different ways. So you've got multiple platforms, multiple audiences, multiple languages. But at the same time, it's a really unique opportunity to paint a tapestry of drama across them, if you can integrate them all, and do it in such a way that your audience is communicating with you and shaping it. But you can also guide it as well. When you want to introduce those concepts into a live performance, so like actors performing like I'm talking to you now, it adds another element again. If you do it again with a live audience in the room, then that multiplies it again. So multiple inputs. You can tell narrative and drama across it. It's complicated and it's a different way of working. And one of the ways you have to conceive of it now is... So one of the ways we need to change our way of thinking is, let's get rid of you and put, so we don't lose me. Sorry, a little bit of driving. Oh, So, one of the ways we have to consider changing the way we think about it is in terms of layers. There's a layered effect to the way we create an online stage. Yeah, because layers represent the different filters that exist between me on my side of this screen and you on your side of that screen. Now those layers are, as you can imagine, complex and can be complicated. So we can start with the physical layer of the environment that I'm sitting in. We can start with the layer of the technology that I'm using to capture the video and audio, where there's the layer of the computing software and the hardware of the computer and the software that I'm using to code that. Then there's the layer of sending that coded signal out to the relevant platforms. Then those platforms have layers of access and communication that you use. at your end, and I'm communicating to you through, in the example next to me, through all those layers to you, and you are communicating back down through all those layers to me. So it's not a spatial relationship as such, like we would be familiar with a theatre or a film set or something. It's a kind of layered relationship. Social relationships are layered like this. Yeah. So that's where you start to... Have you ever played one of those like three-dimensional chess games that kind of look like that image, where you've got a board on each level, or dominoes, or not dominoes, drafts or whatever? It's kind of a little bit operating like that. Of course, there's also the layer of theatricality like I'm doing now, where I've got overlays and green screens and different effects as well, which can also add to the dramatization of your story. So where we lose things like lighting effects, we gain through visual effects. I don't think those aspects particularly change, they're just different. The fundamental change is this layered concept of communicating with people. Now, to give you an example of what that actually, that's a nice abstract idea, but it actually lives in reality, is that, no, I want that one, I don't want that one, I want that one. Yes. To give you an idea of what that looks like in actual reality, right, this image down here is a blank image of the broadcast software that I am using, and when you see me working, this is what I'm driving, and this is effectively how it looks to me. So on the left hand side you have the preview window, so that's me setting up different shots and changes to transition to. On the right hand side is the live image that goes out. So I can set up a shot over here in the back, and it operates a little bit like a lighting cue. You know, if you ever did old school lighting on a manual lighting board, you would know that you have your lighting state on one channel, and then while that one's operating, you go to the next channel, you set up the next state, and then you do the switch, and then you keep one step ahead, and you keep moving. It's a little bit like that. Down the bottom, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different colours. They are literally, and they're called layers, clear layer, they are layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, layer 5. On each of those layers, I can put different stuff. So, for example, the stream I'm doing at the moment, my microphone inputs are all on the 5th layer. They're at the bottom layer. And I've got my green screen backgrounds on the 4th layer up. Then I've got a couple of cameras that aren't working properly on the next one up. Then on the next layer up, all those little scenes I've showed you where I've gone from the proscenium arch and the camera and I've twisted and all the rest of them. So they're all pre-set up on the 3rd layer. The 2nd layer. So I've got lots of different combinations of cameras and shots and things all pre-organized, and I just switch from one to the other. And then on my top layer, I've got all my things like that, like my Twitter feed down the bottom there. So the way the layers work is that, so the Twitter feed layer, which is layer 1, that sits on top of everything else, right? So that's why there are things that appear like they're behind it. That's the other way, so you can look at it that way, or you can look at it that way. So it looks like there's things behind other things, yeah, and that's this process. So I'm as a maker of getting content out there, I have to think in terms of layers of interface that create an experience for you at the other end. And I also need to, I need to create in that structure of layers the opportunity for you to connect back through them to me. And that is why doing theatre online is more than just setting up a camera and filming yourself performing something. Because yes, we can do it, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. There's not a value judgment of any kind at all. You do you, go out, get your shit out there, right? But if at the end of the day, you're in my opinion as a theatre maker, at the end of the day, you are making GIFs, clips, films, short little packages of content that's hermetically sealed and cannot be changed or interacted with apart from comments or feedback or things like that. I was looking to make theatre that had much more of those qualities, those innate qualities that we're familiar with. The idea of people in a room, energy, communication, that you could feel the ebb and flow of a performance based on how that relationship was going on. So in my quest to try and find a way of delivering narrative drama live in the terms of a play and maintain and harness that energy, that's where this journey has led me to. It's led me down this rabbit hole of having to completely pull apart all the taken for granted assumptions I had about performing online. And for the actors, it's like that as well. Nikki, my wife, who did the Lunch with Jenna series that you can see, I think if it's not on my YouTube channel, it's on my Vimeo. I've got so many sites. Anyway, as the actor, she was saying that for most actors, the objective is to become the role, to be authentic in the role and to live that experience, to create that authenticity. That doesn't change. But conventionally, I guess actors are taught, well, the way it was put to me when I was taught is that you out of your entire 100% of consciousness, you want 90% of your consciousness to be character, you want 10% of your consciousness to be what they call the sensor. So that's the thing that tells you, hit that lighting cue, walk through that door, pick up that prop, look out for the rug, those things that keep you safe. Yeah, but you want to try and just keep that as a little sort of on standby mode that's happening in the background. And have the majority of your consciousness embedded in the character. That percentage, I think, has shifted and changed in this space because, as Nikki, we used a lot of character-based improvisation, Robin. We used a lot of that Mike Lee style method, and that really we needed the actors to deeply understand. In fact, we needed them to understand their characters at that deeper level even more than if they were just doing a play. And the reason was because when they're actually performing, that part of your sensor that normally keeps you safe has to be expanded, because what the actor is dealing with is technical things like microphones, right? Where's the camera? Am I looking down the camera and talking to the audience in this one, or am I talking to the character? All of those things have to be choreographed. And what are the beats of the narrative? Where am I in that narrative of beats? And the reason you have to keep track of beats is because, like I say, as soon as you dip into dialogue, you very quickly dip into the fourth wall and you alienate your audience. Now that's okay, because you can use that as a theatrical device. But generally speaking, like I say, you have to create characters that are dependent on the input of the audience who demands the opportunity to contribute. And that also means you may end up getting stuff from that audience that you're not ready for. It's still in keeping with the play, it's still in keeping with the character and all the rest of it, but it's not in keeping with the narrative of the story. Now, you can't ignore it, you've got to go with it. And it can take you off on a weird ass tangent. And to do that, you have to know your character really well to be able to do that kind of improvisation. But eventually, you've got to get back to the narrative of the script. So how do you do that? And what devices have you got? It can get quite complex when you're dealing with comments coming from the live audience in the room, and you're getting comments coming from Twitter or YouTube or on social media platforms. The audience can talk to you in the room. The audience can talk to you while they're in the room. They can be on their Twitter account talking to you as someone else. So the audience can be playing multiple characters. The actor wouldn't know the difference because they don't recognise the handle. Then you've got the audience. Then you've got the audience in the room being able to communicate with the audience online. If they're in a chat thread like this, people can go off and talk to one another and not talk to the actors at all. And so there does become a sense of energy in a room. When that's firing, it is a complex whirlwind. Talk about harnessing that energy. It's a complex whirlwind of energy, because you've got stuff in the room, you've got stuff happening with your actors and the drama that's going on and the tension between these two actors and these characters, and you've got social media, you've got technical stuff all around you, you've got to get cues from your producer. It is absolutely it is absolutely a live theatre performance. The whole, and that's it, the whole thing is the theatre. The whole experience, the whole event is the theatre, not just the narrative. Yeah. I could go on ad infinitum. However, it is 10:20. I feel like I've come to a natural conclusion. If any of this has made sense, I'm glad, and I hope that it helps maybe make you think about it. If any of this has confused the absolute hell out of you, I totally understand. Like I say, I've come to these points of understanding and realisation after about 7 years of research, and the last 18 months particularly have been epic. So I'm working really hard at trying to understand these things and then condense and communicate them to other people so that they can do them as well, use them as well. One of the other features about this layered effect and all the rest of it is that you can create narrative drama and you don't have to be in the room. You can be working globally around the world. There's a huge opportunity for live performance online just with the technology that we've got. I haven't even started exploring virtual reality with this stuff yet, but I'm super keen to do so because it's amazing. The elusive bit is the content. How do you get back on track with your narrative after audience interruptions? Well, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. First of all, when you learn the script, what we were doing is that we were learning the beats of a scene. So, scene 2, character A has to get from here to here, and there has to be this conflict. It's almost like this character-based improvisation. In this scene, this character will go from happy to sad, and the trigger will be a conflict between these two characters. Now, during the course of running the scene, it goes off tangent, you get all these interactions, it goes all the rest of it. Because both actors are aware of their character's arc in that scene, they can improvise their way through. Like if the scene is based on an argument, they can through dealing with all the other stuff, they can start to niggle each other and argue with each other until eventually they can get that argument to a point where they can slip into a bit of dialogue and just take it off naturally. So that's where the ability for the actor to have a very clear idea of a script in terms of beats that they have to hit. Sometimes the actors will improvise something. So they might improvise seeing, as with all performance, there are some things that the actors can see and there's some things the audience can't see. So the audience can't see even though you tell the audience, well, I can do it now. I can tell you that I'm looking at 3 different chat feeds. Am I? Have to take my word for it. But I can use that as a device to be able to go, oh, look, someone just asked me a question. Oh, okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Great. So, and there's my device to get back into what I want to talk about. Sometimes we've taken that to another level again, and we've pre-recorded a social interaction. For example, if you look at Lunch with Jenna episode 3, well, it's episode 51, but it's the 3rd in the trilogy. There are characters who appear like I'm appearing now as a picture-in-picture video call to the actor who was. And it was an old school theatre technique. I pre-recorded, so there was a section of dialogue between those 2 characters that was fixed, and I sat down in my studio and I pre-recorded all character B's lines, and I broke them up into little chunks, little soundbite chunks, and then Nikki was on stage, and I would bring up the vision of someone sitting there as if they were sitting there, and to mask it, I did it in one of those, we cannot reveal this person's identity, so it was silhouette, so you couldn't see, and I just had that on a loop. I was just moving like that, so it looked like this person was alive and moving. And then separately, I had a little sound cue thing, and so Nikki would say her line, and I would press go on the sound cue. And then Nikki would say a line, and I would press go on the sound cue, and it would sound like dialogue, and it would look like dialogue. So it's about, that's the gold, isn't it? That's the juice for a theatre maker. Can you suspend disbelief? Yes, you can. Yeah, you can, because no one knew. The other thing about it is because it's so malleable and integrated. So when Nikki and I were doing this scene, she would say a line, I would hit go on the sound cue. Sometimes what would happen is that the audience would interrupt that conversation, because by now they feel like they can talk whenever they want. So they do. And so they would just jump into the middle of that scene and say, oh, that was, I've got something to say about that. And then Nikki would have to stop and improvise and deal with that. And then we would come back to the lines again. And sometimes it would work either way. Sometimes the recorded line was a question, so I could just press the sound cue and the character would ask Jenna the question, which would get Jenna back or get Nikki back online. Sometimes Nikki had to just sort of wrap up that little bit of improvisation with that audience member and then get back to the conversation where I was waiting to continue with the sound cue. So there are a number of ways that you can manipulate stuff to get back, but and some of them are technical, some of them are the actor, but that's, like I say, where the actor has to be super aware of so many different aspects that they can just shift and change and adapt as they go. So does that sort of help? There's a range of, you can use the devices that you got, you can use the platforms that you've got too, the other what I tried to do with these shows is, in film, the editor, you want the editor to be invisible. You don't want to see the edit, ideally, unless you do. And I realised pretty quickly that as a broadcaster producer, I was, like I'm doing now, I'm operating as a DJ, moving between different shots and different things like that. And if I did too much of that, then that would kill the suspension of disbelief, because the audience starts to realise there's someone behind the camera. It's like, how does Bear Grylls get out in the middle of nowhere and still talk to you without a camera? Where's the camera dude? Like, who's holding the camera? That kind of realisation. So as the producer director working live, you actually have quite a few with this thing that I'm showing you here, this panel of things here. you've kind of got a lot of different tools at your disposal to also manipulate and move and shift and change and bump the story in a particular direction, depending on what thing you use and who gets to see it. So yes, in that sense, when you are performing live, it is quite a dynamic experience where there's lots happening all at once, and it can feel very exhilarating. In fact, it's probably, in some ways, it's some of the most exciting work I've ever done, because it's just so unknown, it's so untapped. There's so many different variations and ways of telling stories. And the other thing is, we have to find stories that are of online experiences. It's no good taking a Samuel Beckett or a Sam Shepard or something and putting the play on, because those plays were written with that public solitude. They were written in that form. So the other real exciting opportunity for me is that you can't take a story of real life and put it on here. Likewise, you couldn't tell the story of a drama that happened online and write it into a play on stage. You just wouldn't be able to communicate it. You wouldn't be able to communicate all the emojis and the text messages and the dings and the notification sounds, all of those things that make up the environment of living online. So in that sense, this for me is really exciting, because there's a whole world of new stories out there that have never been told, that have never been experienced, that could never even have been imagined, because they only exist in this space. And those stories are waiting to be told and discovered. And I've got a couple in my back pocket that I'm kind of working on at the moment. But for the moment, I got to get this thesis done. I got to get it done. I'm going to go do now. I'm going to go have a coffee. I think I've hit my load. Any other questions? Any other questions, class? No. All right, look, if you want to contact me, you can do so a number of different ways. You can do so a number of different ways. One of the ways you can do it, let's get rid of you. One of the ways you can do it is you can go to you can go to my Patreon page, where you can become a patron for $2 a month. Nothing. Thanks, Rob. Cheers, bud. Thanks for joining me. Share the love. I'll speak to you soon. You can join me on Patreon. I've got michaelallenproductions.com. You can get me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, ResearchGate, Figshare. You can reach me here. All the links are on here on YouTube or Twitch or Twitter or wherever you happen to be watching at the moment. All right, I will be back again in 2 weeks. The date of that is 2 weeks from now. The date of that will be, not next week, is the 3rd. The date of that, okay, Friday the 10th. Good Friday. Good Friday. Let's do a Good Friday stream, shall we? Stay safe, stay isolated, do the right thing. I'm quoting Elsa from Frozen 2 a lot lately. Just do the next right thing. Yep, that's all you can do. Just do the next right thing. Love you long time. Share the love. See you later. I am out.